Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Oathbringer. I just want to thank you all again for your patience and your continued support. Working full-time and balancing everything else in life is a challenge, as I'm sure many of you know. So today we're covering chapters 11 through 18. I stopped at 19 because I have quite a lot of tabs here, so I feel like there's a lot to talk about in this section, and it was about to hit like another flashback, and so I was like, I think this is a good place to stop, especially because like it left off on a nice, good emotional note for Shallan. So I made sure to do post-it notes this time because there were a couple spots. My first reaction where I put a tab, I couldn't remember why or what it made me feel, so it didn't make the cut. So now I have little post-its with my thoughts on there to help me remember. So this was a quote that I found very interesting and that I enjoyed. He knew battlefields like a woman knew her mother's recipes. He might not be able to give you measurements, but he could sure taste something was off. So true. My mom makes this delicious Spanish rice. She's told me the recipe like once, but I don't know it. I don't remember it, but I'm always her taste tester, and I'm always the one telling her whether or not I feel like she's gotten it right this time. So it's like a feeling. It's a feeling. I think that's what that is. And so in that same chapter, because this is another flashback for Dalinar. Dalinar has just won the blade from Tanalon. I feel like I was going through so many emotions as I read this. I had one post-it that I wrote, and then I continued reading and was like, oh my god, this is what actually happened. He killed the sun. I don't know if I'd be able to sleep at night if I was Dalinar, and that's how I got my blade. Kind of makes sense why he did give it away, but I did find it interesting that the sword is called Oathbringer. Enjoy Oathbringer. You earned it. I think the earning is questionable. Oathbringer? Your sword, Gavilar said. Storms, didn't you listen to anything last night? That's Sunmaker's old sword. Sades, the Sunmaker. He'd been the last man to unite Alethkar centuries ago. Dalinar shifted the blade in his lap, letting the light play off the pristine metal. It sure is now, Gavilar said. By the time you're done, I'll have it so that nobody thinks of Sunmaker anymore. Just House Cullen and Alethkar. He walked away. Dalinar rammed the sword into the stone and leaned back, closing his eyes again, remembering the sound of the brave boy crying. This is obviously like Blackthorn Dalinar, so I don't even know if in that moment he's ashamed of himself, or he's just like, because he talked about how he used to love the thrill of being in battle and killing, and now he hates that feeling. Like we'll talk about in a later chapter where he's like wrestling with a guy, like basically doing like practice fighting and stuff, and he realizes how much he doesn't really enjoy that feeling anymore. And I wonder if that's a similar feeling happening here. But I also wrote that it feels like absolute fate because Dalinar is actually currently working to unite everyone. I think it was fated to be. So Dalinar is asking the Stormfather here about why the Radiants betrayed the Spren. And the Stormfather doesn't want to tell him. Some things are better left forgotten, the voice said to him. You of all men should understand this, considering the hole in your mind and the person who once filled it. It's interesting because it's almost like Dalinar tried to forget his wife for a reason. It's not fully explained yet. And so the Stormfather's like calling him out for that. But I also feel like, history should be taught so we don't repeat it. Maybe sometimes it shouldn't be learned because it's better to be forgotten. I don't know. I think that's a complex situation, and I know at some point we are going to figure out what the Radiants did to betray them, but it's really interesting how I wonder if it could give humans a bad idea, and so that's why the Stormfather's afraid to tell him because of how it might get twisted against the Spren. So I'm pretty sure this is from Lif's point of view from the interludes and Words of Radiance, which is cool because now I know the time frame. So he's talking to the Imperial Majesty CHVD Yanagan I, Emperor of Makabak, King of Azir, Lord of the Bronze Palace, Prime Aquasix, Grand Minister and Emissary of Yazir. He's talking to him on the Span read, and they say that he is a 15-year-old boy, so I'm pretty sure this is kid from Lif's interlude in Words of Radiance, so let me know if that is correct. But then later on, Dalinar's talking about Navani being in the room and how beautiful she is and how happy she is. And he says, who would have thought a man his age could feel so giddy? And I wrote on my post-it, life is strange. Dalinar living his best life after Gavilar passed. Which is kind of interesting because like now that he can officially be with Navani, this is when he's really happy, but he had to lose his brother for that. And so life is strange. Like I said, some things happen we wish never did, but then other things come into play because of that. So they're still talking to the council for that young prince from Lif's interlude. And it's very suspicious how they're saying that there was a mistranslation in what they were saying, and then they just quickly get off the span read. So clearly, like, they're hiding something. It'd be cool if we get an interlude to see what's going on over there and what's actually happening with them, because they tried to say they were making negotiations with the Voidbringers, and then so it's all feeling very sus. And we know that that city has been sort of purified. They run a very specific way. They're a happy kingdom, but is it happy with maybe all the things going on behind the walls that people don't know about? So Elhokar just asked Dalinar to become basically like a high king of Urithiru, and he's just going to focus on Alethkar, basically going to send him back through I can't think of the word, guys. I'm going to call it a portal right now, to go back into Alethkar to figure out what's happening there. And Elhokar is going to be in charge of it. And it's kind of sweet how he thanks his uncle. Thank you for believing in me, if only this small amount. I think that was the hardest thing, is that Elhokar became king sooner than he wanted to, and he didn't really have time to mourn his dad, and he wasn't really raised properly into this role, and I think it really overwhelmed him, but now he really wants to step up and make a difference. So it was just really sweet kind of seeing him be like, I want to do this now, and he felt like Dalinar noticed him. But right when that happens, he gets told another message comes through on the span read, and it's our favorite. I can't pronounce his name. Terravanagan. Basically, we know who he is. He's from Kharbranth, and he now is apparently the king of Yag-Kaved. He cannot be trusted. I don't like him. I wrote on my post-it that I thought he died, but I don't think that's true. But either way, I can't wait for the chaos that's going to ensue when they meet. It's going to be bad. But I'm hoping that he'll tell Shallan, and Shallan will be like, absolutely not. So waiting for that moment to happen, because in these almost 100 pages I read, it did not happen. Then we have some cute romantic moments happening with Shallan and Adolin, because I'm still team them. Adolin stood up from leaning against the wall of the corridor and took her in. Frazzled hair, dress that had missed 2 buttons, cheeks flushed, and then he grinned a dopey grin. I just thought that was a really cute moment of him like taking in Shallan for who she is, mess and all. And then I highlighted, this wonderful princely man actually liked being with her. I think this is really important because like Shallan right now is afraid to be herself, and there's certain things that she obviously hasn't told Adolin, which I really want them to open up to each other. This was another moment I loved for Shallan. She'd spent so long feeling timid. It was so satisfying to hear a reference to her confidence. It was working. Yasna's teaching about practicing and acting like she was in control. It was working. And I feel like Shallan, like, definitely doesn't give herself enough credit. Like, she's been practicing a lot of these habits to feel better in her own skin. But we obviously go back and forth with that feeling, because when she thinks about her and what she did to her mom, it was stuck in her mind. And every time she thought about it, the gaping wound flared up with pain again. Shallan had killed her mother. Her father had covered it up, pretended he murdered his wife. And the event destroyed his life, driving him to anger and destruction. That's very heavy, because I think at that point she's blaming herself for everything. But in reality, everything that her dad did after that was his choice. It's like not her fault. But she's just sad. She's stuck in a rock and a hard place right now with the whole situation. Adolin kind of notices like she's stuck in thought, and he's like, are you well? And I wrote, I wish she would just tell him. But I get that it's complicated. Like he might look at her differently because she killed her mother. But he like strangled Sadeas in cold blood, so if they would understand. Even if it wasn't his father, it was someone he grew up with. And I love that she does not want to hate Pattern. She would not hate him. She could hate the sword she'd used to kill her mother, but not him. There's other stuff with Pattern that comes up, but I think it's really cute that Adolin calls her spren a Shallan spren, which I was talking about in the first podcast about like what would her sword name be. And I put a little heart there because I thought that was really cute. Sanderson outdid himself with this, where Shallan goes out of her way to make Pattern the chaperone for these two hanging out alone in her room. And he doesn't really understand what that is. And I also am very confused how he goes inappropriate, Pattern said, such as dividing by 0. Why is that inappropriate? Is it inappropriate because you just get 0 every time you do it? So I'm like, it's such an interesting like joke and reference that Sanderson made there. And in this moment, I love this quote. The trick to happiness wasn't in freezing every momentary pleasure and clinging to each one, but in ensuring one's life would produce many future moments to anticipate. And I felt like this quote was very strongly saying to be present, be grateful, and trust that more is to come. Pattern and Syl are both naughty because apparently they have both been studying this. They've been studying mating between humans because out of nowhere, Pattern goes, "Oh!" Pattern said suddenly, bursting up from the bowl to hover in the air. You were talking about mating. I'm to make sure you don't accidentally mate, as mating is forbidden by human society until you have first performed appropriate rituals. Yes. Dictates of custom require following certain patterns before you copulate. I've been studying this. I hope he's been studying it via book and not like spying on people like Syl has, because inappropriate. Shallan gets really embarrassed, and Pattern's like, very well, you two. No mating. Utterly killed me. And before we get to the final joke of that Sanderson did, Shallan and Adeline, they start kind of talking about their dating history. And he's like, I'm not good at relationships, Shallan. And she's like, is there anyone who actually is? I mean, is there really someone out there who looks at relationships and thinks, you know what? I've got this. Personally, I rather think we're all collective idiots about it. I just really enjoyed that quote because I think that's very human and real. And there's so many dating experts out there. And I'm like, you guys, relationships are hard. There's no expert or like one way or right way. Like just go to a therapist. But at the end of the day, like no one's perfect. Shallan and Adeline go in for a kiss because they both realize like they're the same and it makes them feel really good. But of course, Pattern ruins the moment and he yells, no mating. I thought that was hilarious. It was a very cute chapter 13. Again, with our favorite couple, Adeline and Shallan, they're trying to figure out who's committed the second murder that is a copycat of Sadia's. And Adeline's trying to tell her, like, I don't think it's the same person. I think it's a copycat. And Shallan, in her inner thoughts, is like, oh, Adeline, Shallan thought. He'd arrived at a theory he liked, and now he wouldn't let it go. It was a common mistake warned in her scientific books. But her scientific books don't know that maybe the person who's saying that is telling the truth because they committed the first one. It'll be very fascinating once she finds out that Adeline killed Sadius. Which brings me to the thing I was talking about before, which is that he says, Shallan, there's something similar that we need to talk about, something that we can't just ignore. Which later on he talks about it being that they both have shard blades. But in her thoughts, she's like, I killed my parents, I stabbed my mom through the chest, and I strangled my father while singing to him. And I wrote more alike than they know. And that's where I feel like they would definitely, I want them to talk about it. I think it's important. I think it's going to cause a lot of issues, but I think it's important to have it out there. But the rest of the scene becomes so cute and emotional because Adeline is so excited that he can teach her sword fighting. She obviously feels very uncomfortable using the sword. It's because you hate me, Pattern said softly. I can die, Shallan. I can go. They'll send you another to bond. Ugh. Absolutely killed me. And Shallan starts to draw like another version of her to give her like this form of confidence so that way when Adeline comes back, she can hold Pattern and she can fight and use him as a sword, even though that's the last thing she wants to do. And I feel bad for Pattern. I think she says she won't hate him, but like everything is involved with him and her. And I really hope they work this out and Shallan comes to be able to deal with this. It makes me sad. So I wrote this, but then later on at the end, I have very different thoughts. First, when, Shallan uses her powers to change her a look, I compared it to like when you get a haircut or a new outfit or you are putting on a playlist, something that helps you feel more confident, or you do like the Superman pose or something. Later on, I think she takes it a little too far into the land of avoidance. I think I'm confusing myself for unnecessary reasons, but honor is the god of Spren, not of the human gods, correct? Because the Almighty is dead, but he said he was never their actual god. And right now, Dalinar is having a conversation with Stormfather for chapter 16 about dealing with Odium and how he has to fight him. Dalinar tapped the honor blade. A fragment of Honor's own soul crystallized into metallic form. In a way, the death of their god gave him hope, for if Honor had fallen, surely Odium could as well. When he says there, is he referring to their god as in the humans or in the Spren? So that's just a clarification I would like, because I think I'm over confusing my brain. But ideally, Odium should be able to die if they did kill Honor. Okay, so this was really interesting because, like I said earlier, Dalinar was talking about how he doesn't really like the thrill of being in battle or fighting anymore. And he is practicing sword fighting with Kadash right now, who is his ardent, who has a lot of issues with Dalinar right now for renouncing the Almighty and saying all the blasphemy things that he's saying. And Dalinar tells him about his former master, who taught him all the things he knows, and about why he was taught to tie his belt 3 times. And it turns out it was because the very first Ardent was just really short, and so he needed to do it 3 times so it wouldn't drag on the floor. I love tradition, Dalinar said to Kadash. I fought for tradition. I make my men follow the codes. I uphold Vorin virtues. But merely being tradition does not make something worthy, Kadash. You can't just assume that because something is old, it is right. And I think that's so true, and that tradition comes from many different things, and we don't necessarily always know why. And his lesson that he told Kadash, like his story, which teaches a lesson, is very much pointing out that, like, you don't know where tradition came from. And sometimes it's just out of, like, needing to make a good memory, or because your belt is too long. And traditions, I do think, need to be broken sometimes and reinvented. And then as someone who myself is no longer religious, this plotline is really fascinating to me. The world is ending, Kadash, Dalinar said. I can't simply rely on tradition. I need to know why. Convince me. Offer me proof of what you say. You shouldn't need proof in the Almighty. You sound like your niece. I'll take that as a compliment. What? What of the heralds? Kadash said. You don't deny them, Dalinar. They were servants of the Almighty, and their existence proved his. They had power. Power, Dalinar said. Like this? He sucked in stormlight. Murmuring rose from those watching as Dalinar began to grow. Then did something else. Commanded the light. When he rose, he left Kadash stuck to the ground in a pool of radiance that held him fast, binding him to the stone. The Ardent wriggled, helpless. The Knights Radiant have returned, Dalinar said. And yes, I accept the authority of the heralds. I accept that there was a being once, named Honor, the Almighty. I just answered my own question. I'm so silly. So Honor was the humans' gods, and his name was the Almighty. I accept that there was a being once named Honor, the Almighty. He helped us. I would welcome his help again. If he can prove to me that Vornism, as it currently stands, is what the heralds taught, we will speak again. I love the needing of proof, because, like, there's so much in history, and a lot of history gets left out in order for religion to be proven that it's the right choice, the only one, or the right one. And I think that you need to look at both sides, and it's very complicated. And I just find this so fascinating, especially because Sanderson is Mormon, and he has a lot of these things in his stories. Also, something crazy happened. Navani was talking to Dalinar about the person he was speaking to on the Span Reed. It was from the kingdom where his wife was from, and Navani happened to say her name. Dalinar grunted. Rhea was never strong enough to try to claim the plate back, but if it will bring Eerie to our side, then I'd consider it. Maybe I can agree to... He trailed off. Wait, what did you say? Huh? Navani said. About, oh right, you can't hear her name. Say it again, Dalinar whispered. What? Navani said. Evie? Memories blossomed into Dalinar's head. He staggered, then slumped against the writing table, feeling as if he had been struck by a hammer to the head. Navani called for physicians, implying his dueling had overtaxed him. That wasn't it. Instead, it was the burning in his mind, the sudden shock of a spoken word. Evie. He could hear his wife's name. That's crazy. And I'm wondering if it's like what he said before about, like, trying to prove if, like, Vornism is actually what the heralds taught. I don't know. Maybe he's speaking more truth, so that's why it's been broken. I don't know. So we have jumped back to Kaladin now, and he found a group of Parshmen, and they're just playing cards. They're just simple creatures doing simple things, and it makes me, they're talking about how they don't want to be imprisoned again, and that they would kill who was in charge of them if it meant it kept their freedom. And I think that's what it is with a lot of these Parshmen, is that they just don't want to be slaves anymore. Literally, there's a line where I have a post-it that says, literally treating the Parshmen like cattle. And that's really messed up. Sold her because she had birthed a healthy child, which made her good breeding stock. That is absolutely sickening and horrible to do that to someone and separate them from their family. I don't eat meat, and a huge part of that is because of how we treat animals, specifically in the U.S. I don't want to get too vegan political on you all, but I just think it's an interesting food for thought to think about. how we treat things that we feel are lesser than us. I love that Sanderson put that in there because I don't agree with this. The Parshmen pulled him ever closer. They may have taken your freedom, but they took our minds. So Kaladin is trying to be like, I understand. I've been a slave before. And it's true. I don't like comparing traumas, but at the end of the day, Kaladin can't understand what they have been through. They've been living in a haze, very unaware of their surroundings, being able to have choices. And they've been reawoken now, which I do think is a good thing. Obviously, we don't want them to have like red eyes and be, involved with the anger spren. But according to Syl, they're actually following that spren, the Everstorm. Yeah, Kaladin just can't really understand what they have truly been through. And the Everstorm woke them up and allowed them to be who they are again, which I think is valuable. Obviously, I do still think, unfortunately, there might be some bigger battle that goes on with higher Parshmen, which is kind of what the Voidbringers are right now with like their red eyes and stuff. And the anger spren has really changed them. But I do think there are a lot of Parshmen who are just happy to be out of the haze and be able to have like autonomy over their mind again. So Pattern being adorable, and he's also Team Adolin, which I love him. The swordsman, Pattern said, the one you can't mate with yet? Can we please stop talking about him that way? Very well, Pattern said, but I like him. You hate his sword. I have come to understand, Pattern said, growing excited. Humans don't care about the dead. You build chairs and doors out of corpses. You eat corpses. You make clothing from skins of corpses. Corpses are things to you. So everything is a living, breathing creature on this plane, which is fascinating. And that's kind of what Pattern's pointing out. But I tabbed this moment more that Pattern likes Adolin, and I think that's adorable. So I looked up photos of Urithiru because I was trying to understand visually what this place looks like. And there was like a couple of different interpretations I found, but it's really eerie. Scribes talked about the possibility of a hidden aquifer in the mountains, but where would the water come from? Snows at the top of the peaks nearby didn't seem to melt, and rain fell very rarely. So one of the photos that I found showed sort of Urithiru kind of high up in the clouds, surrounded by all these like beautiful things of nature and just existing. And I need to know how that works, how it's possible. So Shallan has decided to go out as Vale, and she's getting really drunk because she's trying to fit in, and she keeps drinking like this horrible thing that just makes me think of moonshine. But then she like sucks in Stormlight, and it helps her sober up, which is hilarious. When she's speaking to the bouncer there, he tells her that someone got stabbed behind one of the taverns just the last night, and so this gives her like a clue trying to solve the case of the copycat. But this is where I said that Vale is going too far. Vale is just a face. No, Vale was a woman who didn't giggle when she got drunk or whine, fanning her mouth when the drink was too hard for her. She never acted like a silly teenager. Vale wouldn't have been sheltered, practically locked away, until she went crazy and murdered her own family. Shallan stopped in place, suddenly frantic. My brothers, Pattern. They didn't kill them, right? What? He said. I talked to Balant over the span reed, Shallan said, a hand to her forehead. But I had light weaving then. Even if I didn't fully know it, I could have fabricated that. Every message from him, my own memories. Shallan, Pattern said, sounding concerned. No, they live. Your brothers live. Moray said he rescued them. They are on their way here. This isn't the lie. His voice grew smaller. Can't you tell? And I think the lie he's pointing out is actually Shallan trying to lie about who she is and avoid herself and not face her feelings. Which I feel like this quote really points that out. I just need to go deeper, she whispered. I can't be Vale only on the surface. She's avoiding herself so hard that this whole thing is now spiraling out of control. Okay, she goes to the bar and she's given a drink because she wants something very different than what she had before. And the bartender says it's something that a horn eater would drink. She found something strangely appealing about it. And I remember Kaladin thinking that she was a horn eater. So I'm like, she has horn eater blood in her. Like, when is this going to be talked about? Or when is Shallan going to discover it? Because the bartender's like, you're not a horn eater. This will kill you. But she seems to be handling it perfectly fine. So again, it's a sign. So she meets some people who tell her about the woman that was killed and that it's already been dealt with. And then she meets someone who gives me rock vibes, like hardcore, but his name is They basically tell her like, oh, we already dealt with the guy who killed the woman the other night. And so she leaves, but then she hears them mention that another woman was killed, and she runs back to the table. I was going to tell you, but you left so fast that just talk. We'd have let the watch take care of Ned, but he couldn't leave it at killing just poor Rem. He killed another person? Betha nodded. One of the barmaids here. that he couldn't let pass. We protect this place, you see, so had to take a long walk with Ned. The man with the knife rubbed his chin. Strangest thing, that he'd come back and kill barmaid the next night. Left her body right around the corner from where he had killed poor Rem. He screamed the whole time we were taking him to his fall that he hadn't killed the second one. Another double murder, Vale thought. Storms, what does it mean? And I also want to know what it means because he said he hadn't killed the second one, as if someone had or something had possessed him. So maybe someone is trying to intimidate Adeline into coming out and saying that he did it, and they're scaring him with all these copycat murders. I don't know, but I don't think that Ned knew he killed the second one, and I want to know who or what made him do it and possessed him, because that's kind of what it sounded like. All right, that is it for this episode of Oathbringer. Thank you so much again for your support and your patience.